Well, what a rich and diverse symposium. I'm loving it. My job is to bring a health voice, and I'm going to strive to sketch out both present problems and possible solutions. But I need to start by just acknowledging that some doubt there is a public health angle of any kind to this story. It's not a minor issue, unfortunately. Why botherism is alive and well in New Zealand. The Mayor of Auckland, Wayne Brown, last month, as you can see on the slide, conceded that climate change was a challenge, but he assured readers of the Sunday Star Times that it won't kill us, unlike plastics, apparently. Well, Wayne, I'm sorry, but you're wrong. There are many ways in which climate change is lethal, and deaths are just the tip of the iceberg. Remember New Zealand's largest mass poisoning. On August the 5th, 2016, the water supply of Havelock North was contaminated with Campylobacter bacteria. There were 4 deaths directly linked to infection, but a third of the town's population of 14,000, that's almost 5,000 people, was affected. The illness was mostly self-limiting, but often debilitating and frequently most unpleasant. The cause? After a long dry spell, extraordinarily heavy rains washed sheep feces into a deep aquifer that fed the town supply unfiltered and unchlorinated. The Royal Society of New Zealand, a year later, in 2017, published a report on climate change and health. It concluded that climate change can undermine all the building blocks of good health. I quite like that model, that mental model. Safe water is just one of these building blocks. Climate change may also threaten food supplies, as Catherine has just outlined, secure shelter, and freedom from disease-carrying pests. Now, heat is probably the hazard we know best. Climate change increases the frequency and intensity of high temperatures, and the World Meteorological Organization estimates heat waves already cause almost 500,000 deaths worldwide each year. Now, I think one of the most important advances in climate change science in the last decade has probably been the development of methods to estimate the contribution or influence of climate change on specific events, so-called attribution research. This is particularly important, I think, for policymakers. And as an example, as you can see here, the Grantham Institute estimated that climate change tripled heat-related deaths in Europe in the early summer heat wave of last year, which is being dwarfed by the events in Europe at present. Closer to home, recall the extraordinary bushfires in Australia in 2019-2020. There were 33 deaths from burns and injury and more than 10 times as many casualties caused by smoke, plus many admissions to hospital for deaths for heart and lung disorders. It's more difficult to attribute fires to climate change than it is heat waves, but the early conclusion that the fires were made 30% more likely by climate change is almost certainly an underestimate. Now, here in New Zealand, our Achilles heel from a health point of view is not fire or heat, but water, and in general the problem is too much rather than too little. Now, of course, Cyclone Gabrielle 3 years ago was said to be the storm of the century. It caused directly 11 deaths, and a formal attribution study found that it was most unlikely that an event of this severity would have occurred without human-induced climate change. There's actually good reason to believe that the death toll was probably more than 11. The impacts of such severe storms on infrastructure, social services, and economic activity are long-lasting, and the health effects accumulate damage to health facilities and broken supply chains, aggravate medical problems of many kinds, and disrupt preventative services such as care in pregnancy, immunisations, and well-child checks. This was rather dramatically demonstrated in Puerto Rico following Hurricane Maria in 2017, where there were about 60 deaths directly attributed to the hurricane. But when people went back and followed up on mortality in the period immediately following the hurricane, found that there were approximately 4,000 excess deaths. Now, what caused those? They were largely caused by failures in primary health, the supply of medicine, vaccinations, and emergency care. I want to say something also about an element of the biosphere that we have by and large overlooked in health. The ocean absorbs more than 90% of the excess heat trapped by greenhouse gas emissions. And it's only recently that we've come to appreciate just how various and important are the effects of deep-seated changes in blue space on human health and well-being. I want to give two examples, one micro, one macro. Over the last 12 months, the coast of South Australia experienced a massive algal bloom. The causes are not well understood, but substantial, unprecedented warming of the ocean very likely made a strong contribution. In March this year, the Four Corners team at the ABC broadcast a report on the bloom called Toxic Tide. It's available on YouTube, and I recommend it highly. One of the findings from the Four Corners team was devastating effects amongst kangaroo populations along the affected coast. Animals suffered a paralytic illness with high mortality. This was evidently no ordinary bloom. The animals were struck by a powerful neurotoxin produced by the algae. Moreover, another important point, the toxin was not only transmitted by touch, it was airborne. The kangaroos were not on the beach, they were grazing on slopes above the water. I won't speculate on what the effects may have been for the human population. That's the subject presently of a government inquiry. My take-home message is that disruption may spawn surprise. Unbalanced ecosystems commonly lead to unexpected risks. Neither this particular algal species nor the neurotoxin had been identified previously in Australia. Now, the macro example is the El Niño phenomenon. This refers to the interplay of ocean currents and prevailing winds that leads periodically to heating and heavy rainfall in the eastern Pacific. This is a natural cycle, but many climate scientists believe that rising levels of CO2 and warming oceans will promote more intense El Niño events. This year, 2026, the event is shaping up to be the strongest in decades. Well, why does this matter for public health? Because more rain in the east is accompanied by less rain in the west. Typically, the monsoon rains on the western side of the Pacific fall later than usual or not at all. This was the case in the 1870s when drought struck India. Plainly, this was not caused by climate change, but the consequences are relevant here. Drought, crop failure, and famine led to public health tragedy perhaps unmatched since the Black Death. Perhaps there were 50 million deaths, according to the historian Mike Davis, due, interestingly, to a combination of extreme weather and coercive free market policies imposed by the British government, which had learnt nothing from the Irish famine shortly before. Who's most affected? This is perhaps a question that springs from the Indian experience. Who's most affected by food insecurity resulting from heat, drought, and famine? The answer is those who are already on the margin. This is true almost everywhere. Climate change acts as a risk multiplier, Mostly, health problems due to climate change aren't novel, they're familiar problems made worse. For these reasons, climate change is a fierce challenge to health equity. Those who are already on the margin, those whose health is already insecure, these are typically the people at greatest risk, even if they've contributed little to climate change in the first place. This is true between and within countries. Well, how should we respond? I attended last month a meeting organised by the World Bank and the German Development Bank on smart buys in climate and health. That was the title we were given. There's no report yet from the meeting, but this is my conclusion on the slide here. Evidently, there's no shortage of high-value interventions that may mitigate, adapt, and promote health. Here are big problems, but we're not helpless. Let me give 3 examples. So-called smart healthcare facilities are resilient, low-carbon, and clinically high-performing. These are high-value because they avoid damage, downtime, and healthcare disruption. The World Bank's very keen on these. It conducted a trial in the Caribbean and found benefit-cost ratios of up to 300 to 1. Closer to home than the Caribbean, I think the new hospital in Niue is an excellent example. It was rebuilt in the centre of the island after the old hospital on the coast was destroyed by Hurricane Heta. The new facility is safer and provides better care, and take note, the solar farm installed next to the hospital reduces dependence on polluting and unreliable diesel. As Catherine commented in her talk, there are plenty of opportunities for dietary interventions that will simultaneously reduce emissions and save health system costs. In this study, look at 2 modest changes: 1 meatless meal a week, or replacing red meat, lamb and beef, with poultry and pork, which lead to 20% gains if adopted across the whole population and about a 10% reduction in greenhouse emissions, or a more radical approach in a lacto-vegetarian diet, one that excludes meat, seafood and eggs but includes dairy, where the dial is shifted by 30 to 40%. And finally, transport. Been mentioned already several times this morning. In New Zealand, this sector is the largest contributor to CO2 emissions, and we know how to make big improvements with technology already in hand. This shows the Transport Emissions Reduction Plan for Auckland, which aimed to cut greenhouse emissions by 2/3 by 2030. That was the bold and ambitious plan. Unfortunately, this plan has not yet been acted upon. But the point is that fewer motor vehicle trips and more public transport, walking and cycling, would be good both for the climate and for health. Across New Zealand, motor vehicles are the major source of local air pollution, fine particles and nitrogen dioxide, and I estimated that the climate strategy, if implemented, would save about 380 premature deaths a year in Auckland, due solely to improved air quality. In summary, undoubtedly there are health risks associated or resulting from climate change. They're serious, and unless acted upon, will certainly place further pressures on a healthcare system that is already struggling, as you've already been told. But, I repeat, we're not helpless. Before he died 2 years ago, the late, great and sorely missed Rod Oram made a series of short videos for Newsroom. He intended to highlight big new ideas that might lead our response to climate change. Rod called his series The Way Forward, and I think it's well worth watching, especially the programs on urban green space, food security, Māori knowledge, and community deliberation. Well, look, this is my last slide. It's my oldest daughter and her 2 children. I have their permission to show the picture. The bicycle is a metaphor, I reckon, Efficient and fun, this is a vehicle for good public health and a calm mind, safe sociability, and a tiny carbon footprint. It's not a magic bullet. This is no way to transport a piano or to visit relatives in Germany. But I think the bicycle is a reminder. There are many actions we can take to advance sustainability with co-benefits. There's no need to wait. We have means to build a future that respects the environment and enables humans to flourish. Let's seize these opportunities. Thank you.